Hey everyone, my name is Mrs. Crawford, and this video is going to go over the review for quiz number 2, which you guys are going to be taking on Monday. I believe October 1st would be the actual date. Not quite sure, maybe October 2nd. It's coming up on Monday. So this review is posted on Google Classroom, and it's very, very similar to the quiz you're going to be taking. I would strongly recommend that you do the review first and try that on your own, then watch this video, because it's going to kind of defeat the purpose if you just go and watch the answers and don't actually practice it on your own. So the first 2 problems are really just review from the first quiz, just checking to see if you still know your stuff. So for the first one, it tells you that this spot right here is 63 degrees, and you're trying to find this missing piece over here. So first of all, let's decide, is this angle 63 a type of angle pair with that one? No, they're not. So we got to kind of use some other stuff to figure that out. I know that 63 degrees is also congruent to angle 3 because those are actually vertical angles. So I'm going to mark that as 63 degrees. Those are congruent. Now I've got a relationship here because this missing angle and this angle 3 spot that I just marked 63 degrees, those ones are same side interior angles, which means they have to add up to 180 degrees. So if I know that this is 63, that means that this must be 180 minus 63. So if I do a little quick math in my head, I believe that ends up being 117 degrees. I believe that's correct. Okay, so a little bit extra steps there, but good refresher on our angle types. If I move on to the second one, let's check and see, are these ones an actual type of angle pair? They actually are already. They are corresponding angles. They're both in the same spot in their little cluster. Corresponding angles are equal to each other. Remember that kind of formula we built, which means if this is 112, so is this one. So that one's kind of already done. Okay, so it's just a quick refresher for that one. Moving on to the next ones. Number 3 says 2 angles in a triangle measure 48 and 57 degrees. Explain how to solve for the measure of the third angle. Now there's a couple ways you could do that. I like to do it mathematically, so I would probably show the equation. However, if you wrote this out in words, that's okay as well, but just make sure what you did actually explains how to solve. So make sure you say that they were added up, you add up 48 and 57 and subtract from 180, or you explain how you set it up in this equation. One of those options if you're going to put it just in words. I like to put it like this. This is our missing third angle. If I add these 2 together, let's see, I get 15, 100. I'm going to just use my calculator. See, this is the weekend for me as well, so my mental math capacity is pretty low. So I'm just going to double check so I don't make a stupid mistake during my video. 105, okay, it is that. Plus x equals 180. Get rid of this guy, which really is what you were doing. 48 and 57 together, take away the difference, and we end up with 75. So no matter what, you should have somehow explained how you got 75 degrees for the last one. Number 4 actually uses the same kind of principle as this one. You've got 3 angles in a triangle. In fact, what does this little box mean? Good refresher on that. That means 90 degrees, so make sure you're aware of that. And all 3 of them together have to add up to 180. Remember, that's our goal. We talked about this during a day or 2 of our unit. Now it's just a matter of plugging them in. I'm going to put the 4x plus 6 here, plus 60 plus 90. This is the one that we tend to see people miss the most. People put 4x plus 6 plus 60 equals 180 and then just stop. You can't do just 2 angles, so be careful about that. Make sure you put all 3 together equaling 180. Now it's just a matter of algebra. I can put together the 6, the 60, and the 90. Let's drop down the 4x. 6 plus 60 plus 90 is 156. And I'm kind of zooming through this because I'm assuming you guys actually did it beforehand, and now you're just kind of checking your work and getting the help if you need. So that's gone. And then we end up with 24 when I subtract 180 and 156. To get x by itself, we just divide by 4, and we get that x equals 6 for the answer. So if you did it a different way, that's fine. As long as you get x equals 6, you should be correct. Okay, now these guys hit on the isosceles triangle section we did. Remember, we spent a whole day talking about that, and some of you guys got to equilateral triangles too. So looking at number 5, these little tick marks, oops, my page moved on me. Let's try that again. Looking at these little tick marks here, that tells us it's an isosceles triangle. 2 of the sides are equal. Remember, we talked about in class, if 2 sides are equal, there's also 2 angles that are equal. In the lesson that I taught with my class, we talked about you could use the little tick marks and kind of go across and you'd find the 2 congruent angles. So there's 1, and if I use this tick mark, that was kind of sloppy, but there's the other one. So this angle and this angle are the ones that are equal to each other. So I'm actually going to set up my 3 blanks. I know that those are going to have to make 180 together, those 3 angles. That's kind of my go-to formula, is knowing that all 3 angles in a triangle have to make 180. Doesn't matter if it's scalene or isosceles or equilateral, still going to follow that rule. So one of them they tell me is 58, so let's fill that guy in. And then it tells me up here that angle B is equal to 3x minus 2. So in reality, that's what that spot is. Now remember what I told you guys, or what we figured out. This angle has to be equal to that angle because it's an isosceles triangle, which means that not only is this spot 3x minus 2, but so is this spot. So be careful not to put 58 twice. 58 is just this kind of top spot of the angle, or the triangle, my bad. And then again, it's based on these tick marks. You have to go opposite of that to get it. So it's going to be a little bit more complicated to fill in, but that's not a big deal. We're capable of figuring that out. So let's put together some like terms. Let's start with the x's. I've got 3x and 3x. That's going to make 6x. And then I have 58 minus 2, which is 56. Minus 2 again, which is 54. And then it still equals 180, and now I can just do my basic algebra stuff from here. Minus 54. So I get 6x, and I get 126, if my mental math is correct. Divide both sides by 6. I'm going to check that on my calculator. And I should get x equals 21. Okay, and again, I figured out that these are the same because I looked at the tick marks. This angle is opposite from this side. This angle is opposite from this side. It told me up here that angle B is 3x minus 2. That's how I knew that those two were equal. They had to be the same thing. Okay, now look at this one, number 6. The pieces of information that are important here are these little angle arches, which kind of like the tick marks. Tick marks mean that sides are equal. These arches mean that those 2 angles are equal. So again, this is another isosceles triangle. Remember what we talked about. If 2 sides are congruent, 2 angles are congruent, but it also works the other way. If 2 angles are congruent, 2 of the sides have to be congruent as well. So I'm going to kind of reverse what I did here and go from the angle to the side. So this side and this side have to be equal to each other. Okay, now that does not mean that all 3 sides add up to 180. Remember, we use this rule because it's angles. Angles add up to 180 degrees. Don't try and use that trick for everything. This one is so much simpler. If 2 sides are congruent to each other, congruent means equal. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Congruent means equal. So if 11 has to be equal to 2x minus 5. Set them equal to each other. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Okay? Now the reason I couldn't do it over here, some of you might have been saying, well, why can't I just set 3x minus 2 equal to 3x minus 2? You could, but then it doesn't actually solve. You can try it and you'll see you end up with 0 equals 0, which isn't very helpful. So that's where we kind of had to work around that over here. However, in this one, since these are two different sides, one's 11, one's 2x minus 5, I can actually solve it this way. So let's get the number away from the x. Move that 5 over, I get 2x equals 16. Much nicer equation to work with this time. Pretty easy to finish up. We get x equals 8. Okay, so there's my final answer. Alright, so for these last two now, the number 7 goes into our mid-segment section. Now remember with that one, our key point is that the mid-segment is half the length of the side that's opposite it. So the formula we did when we had that section is 2 times the mid-segment equals the opposite side. So what's important here is making sure you know which one the mid-segment actually is. In this case, it's VU. So I'm going to replace mid-segment with 2x minus 7. The side that's opposite to it is the one that's parallel. In this case, that would be WY. So I'm going to replace opposite with 2x minus 2. If you know that formula, setting it up is pretty easy. Now you've got a little bit of work to do algebra-wise. Make sure to distribute that 2 to the mid-segment side. So 2 times 2x is 4x. 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. And then we still have 2x minus 2 on that side. So I'm going to finish up the math for that really quick. Hopefully you got that if you know your algebra pretty well. Get 4x. Now we have 2x plus 12. Hopefully I'm doing my mental math correctly. So we're gone. 2x equals 12. Oops, that's a 2. And x should equal 6. And I'm going to just double check that really quickly. If I plug in 6, 2 times 6 is 12. 12 minus 7 is 5. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 minus 2 is 10. And that works out perfectly. 5 is half of 10. So my mid-segment does work out. Last one over here is kind of a combination of a few things we've done. Now, the big thing is trying to get these angles, okay, because they only actually give me one. So I'm probably going to be using that angle trick we talked about. All the angles have to add to 180. If you're doing angles, that's always a good fail-safe. I know one of them is 3x plus 7. This one on the outside is 140. And it's linear with this one. Linear means it has to add up to 180 degrees. That doesn't mean that this is 140. It means that the inside angle is 40. 140 and 40 make that straight line 180. Same kind of idea over here. This outside angle is 80, and this is a linear pair. They make 180 together, which means this one's 100. So now I have my two missing angles. One of them's 100. One of them's 40, and I can start doing my algebra from there. Like terms are 7, 140. So if I put them together, I get 147. Minus 147. So 3x equals 33. Divide by 3, and you should get x is equal to 11. Feel free to rewind or email your teachers if you need some extra help on these problems. Hopefully this helps you feel a little bit more prepared for the quiz, which again is going to be on Monday. So make sure that if you have questions to ask before the class, we'll have a little bit of time prior to the quiz, but it's really not a good time to try and go over this entire thing. Try and get that either emailed or ask us before school.